Thank you, Madam President. Yes, we are a very organized group here on our side of the aisle, and I rise to align myself with many of the comments that were just recently made by the ranking members of the Finance Committee and of the Appropriations Committee. But before I do that, I also would like to add my thanks and gratitude to the very hard-working chairs and members from the other side of the aisle also on these two very, very important committees. One, in my time in the House, I did serve on the Appropriations Committee, and that's a career all into itself because I don't think there is any one committee that meets as long or as many times as the Appropriations Committee. And now I have a great appreciation, certainly for the work of the Finance Committee and the great work and the very collegial way in which both committees are conducted. So the residents of the state are surely well served. We also, though, do have differences of opinion. And on our side of the aisle, we do represent a number of individuals, in fact, over 1 million. And all of the members of our districts that are both Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. And as such, we have a responsibility to be an advocate for them and to present maybe differing points of view in a way that's thoughtful and is civil. We should remind everyone that the way the system works is that a governor proposes legislation and proposes a budget. It's probably the biggest, most important responsibility that he or she has. And it's up to the legislative body, the chairs and the members of each of these committees, to entertain that particular proposal of a budget and also possibly to come up with one of their own. In this case, we have a vast majority of one party on both the Finance and the Appropriations Committee. 2 years ago, however, and previous years as well, but particularly 2 years ago, the minority party spent many months developing, vetting, and balancing an alternative budget that was presented to the administration, to the majority party, that does maintain near a 2-to-1 majority in the House and Senate. This budget, we maintained, would have reduced the high, unsustainable structural costs embedded in current wages, benefits, pension systems. It contained some substantial consolidations and some outsourcing to our nonprofit community that we felt would put the state on a path to fiscal health. Unfortunately, that suggested alternative that did not include massive tax increases was dismissed out of hand. But now that the budget that was enacted on a party line vote did not produce the revenues needed for the over 7% spending in the last couple of years and resulted in a deficit, there have been some calls for the minority to come up with a few proposals of their own, but in the press, not invited into the room, or negotiate in a bipartisan and flexible fashion. And that's after the horse has left the barn. This particular budget is in the process of being enacted for the next 2 years. And as was just mentioned in very detailed fashion, spends nearly 8 to 10% more than previously, all while we have yet to recover from this historic recession and an anemic recovery at best, with jobs lacking. And some of the proposals that were put in place even prior to the budget, putting a great strain, particularly on our small retailers, our restaurants and so forth, and businesses that are having a hard time struggling. Some of them are even in our own families. This budget breaks so many promises. No new taxes, and yet there's an increase, as was mentioned, in the gas tax, already the highest in the country, that was well elaborated by our good ranking member of the Finance Committee, from 7 to 8% on July 1st. The budget is under the spending cap. It's not under the spending cap. It has a different set of rules than when the spending cap was put into practice. 80% of the public, by the way, voted for that spending cap. But this changes the way in which it's considered, and many feel that the ethical thing to do would be to go back to that public for approval to change the rules instead of going around the public. Some would say that this budget should be accompanied by a declaration of an emergency, and that a 3/5 vote of the public, or both chambers, should be the only parameter that would allow it to go and break that spending cap. This budget maintains that it is gap compliant, but it is not. It also raised nearly $100 million out of the Special Transportation Fund, some of which is one of the most difficult to accept pieces of this budget. It not only goes after, in the most substantial way, to a budget item that is very needed when we have such old infrastructure and have been having problems as of late. It raids the banking fund, it raids the tobacco fund, it raids the probate courts, and for many environmentalists, disheartening to see that it also raids the energy funds. We'd hate to be seen as the land of broken promises, but we made a promise that the income tax was temporary. We made a promise that the spending cap would be in place. We made a promise that the real estate tax would go away and be sunsetted, as well as the corporation tax, the energy tax. We made a commitment to have clean elections and clean laws. No wonder some of us that have served here find it so difficult to say yes to any tax increase of any kind, even though it may be very, very necessary and may have a lot going for it. It's just you reach a point where you just can't do it anymore. And no wonder the public does not trust our state government. Madam President, I find that this budget is very disappointing and have a very hard time voting in favor of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who will you remark? Senator Welsh.